There's this moment that happens every single time I press the record button. I'm sitting here, breathing, practicing my lines, and as soon as the red light clicks on, suddenly there is a shift. It's not just me anymore, there is this other self, a double or an innie, if you will, the version of myself that's fully aware that he's being recorded. And he sits straighter, he speaks clearer, and he edits in real time in his head. And it makes me think that who's in charge? Is me? Or is it the character that I've built maybe out of necessity or out of habit? And the thing is, it's not just a problem of filmmakers or actors. It's a problem of anyone who's picked up their cameras and tried to record themselves. And you will know the feeling of you feeling different in a way. And that's the question I want to dive into today. Why do we perform for camera? And what does the performance do to the art, to the psychology of ours, and to us when nobody is watching us? Agnes Varda once said that she films like she is caressing with her eyes. And when you watch her films, especially Cleaners and Pipe, you feel this intimacy. She's holding the camera, but she isn't hiding behind it. She's present, vulnerable, in the frame. At one point, she turns the camera towards her own aging hands. Even later, she points it towards her gray hair. And these are the makers of time that most of us would cut away from, not her. What she's really doing at this point is kind of acknowledging the double. She's not hiding it, she's not pretending that it's not there. She's kind of weaving it into the fabric of the story itself. She even positions herself as a gleaner, just like the people she's filming it for. And this is the first key. Performing for the camera doesn't need to be fake. Sometimes it's just an invitation. Agnes shows us that double can be revealing, double can be honest. And then there's Abbas Kiarostami. His film Close Up is not just about a man impersonating a filmmaker. It's about a man who so desperately wants to belong to cinema that he cons his way into the family by pretending to be Moshe Malbaf. But here's where it gets stranger. The film itself restages part of the story, using the real people to reenact their own lives. Courtroom footages mixes with performances. Documentary becomes fiction, and fiction becomes documentary. The result is the Hall of Mirrors. And Kiarostami doesn't try to rip the mask away. Instead, he just stacks layers of reflections until you realize and you question yourself in a way that does it really matter which version of the story is real when the emotions are true? This is the haunting beauty and the danger of the double. If you rehearse a version of yourself long enough, the line between performance and reality blurs. And once that blurs, it's really tough to get back from it fully. Andrei Tarkovsky believed that cinema is about sculpting in time. And what he sculpted was most often ordinary, unpolished moments. And you can immediately think of the images what I'm talking about. It's like a kettle boiling, a man walking through tall grass, or a candle burning. And in his films, the sacred emerges not from spectacles. It is kind of captured from the fragments of lived time. Watch Mirror or Nostalgia and you'll understand what I'm talking about. The ordinary transcends precisely because it's not staged to impress. Now imagine Tarkovsky going through Instagram, and maybe it's the same cup of coffee that he might have shot, but it's polished, staged, and aestheticized. A moment not lived, but rehearsed for the feed. That's the contrast. In Tarkovsky, the ordinary opens into transcendence, but on social media, the ordinary is polished into performance. And in that polished performance, we lose the presence. The moment you stand in front of the camera, something changes. You no longer yourself, you're performing for yourself. And that tension between the private self and the performed self, it's been discussed by the acting theory for centuries now. Let's take Stanislavski, often called as the father of modern acting. His system wasn't about pretending, his system was to live truthfully under an imaginary circumstance. The act was not to fake, but to experience the role so fully that the audience forgot the line between reality and role. Then came Stanford Mason, who pushed another step in the process, where acting is the reality of doing. He trained actors to listen so deeply, so honestly, that reactions became inevitable. Presence was everything. And then comes Brecht. He went in a completely opposite direction, where he didn't want the line to be blurred at all. His alienation effect, showing the seams of a performance, if you will, forced the audience to stay alert, to think critically, and not to get lost in the illusion. Now, place these theories in today's world, where social media can look like a Masonry exercise where millions of people are trying to be present, raw, and unfiltered. It can also be a Brecht exercise where it has curated captions and authenticity is staged to feel real, but it is framed. And here's where Agnes Varda comes back. She turns the camera to herself, not to erase the double, but to embrace it. That admits that the act of filming changes reality. For me, this is the turning point, where performance is not just a trick, it is kind of a mirror in a way, where once you started to stare in it, you start to wonder, who am I when the camera is rolling, and who am I when it's not? And psychologists have been circling the same problem. Charles Horton Cooley in 1902 describes the looking glass self, the idea that we build our identity by reflecting back what we think others see in us. We become who we are in response to the gaze. Now add a camera. The gaze isn't just a family or in a room. It's potentially infinite, not a few faces, but hundreds, thousands, or even millions for some people. Suddenly, the double isn't optional, it's kind of built in. You can feel it physically, shoulders tightening, posture shifting, voice clears. The body braces itself involuntarily. That's the double arriving. E. Torrey Higgins in 1987 added another layer, self-discrepancy theory. He said, we live between three selves: the actual self, who you think you are right now, the ideal self, who you wish you were, and the odd self, who you feel you should be. Now put the camera in front of you. Which self shows up? Usually it's a messy version of all the three aspects of it. But once recorded, the blend hardens into an image. And when you watch it back, you start editing your own memory of yourself. And you begin to believe more in the double than the original. Freud once described the double as uncanny, both familiar and alien at once. And that's what's happening here in a way. The double isn't just your mask,
It becomes a figure you have recognize, have fear. And this is why performance can liberate you, but at the same time put you in danger. It lets you step in new roles and new versions of yourselves, but at the same time can trap in an edited reflection. And just as theory predicted, social media becomes a medium to have this double multiplied. Performance used to be occasional, a stage, a film set, or maybe family photos, if you will. But now with social media, it's not rare anymore, it's everywhere. At some point, performing stopped being an art form rather than it became something of a survival skill, if you will, where employers check your profile to understand what you're doing, where families archive their photos on social media. So the gaze kind of never ends. Psychologist Linda Henkel once ran a study in a museum. People remember less about the artwork when they photographed it. And that experiment repeats itself every day in our lives, where we kind of are busy in recording ourselves than actually experiencing it. And now it's not just human anymore, you have algorithmic gaze added to it, where platforms don't just display your performance or your double, if you will, it kind of sorts them, ranks them, and kind of assess and decide which version of your double should be viewed and which one should not be visible at all. And this is where performance shift from personal to industrial in a way, where TikTok dances, Instagram reels, they are not exactly self expression, if you will, because it's kind of an echo of what's working in a standardized process, and you're just repeating it. And the question of who you are, what you want, who you want to become, and who you should be kind of collapses into one consumable content. And this is basically Brecht's theater without actually having any theater. It's a well curated performance which everybody knows is staged, but we scroll anyway. But at the same time, it's democratized. You Acting was something that was preserved to actors who were in front of an audience, but now everybody is an actor, everybody has an audience, and their bedroom is their stage. The danger here is not if the double is replacing us, but it's the fact that are we forgetting that there was a difference in the first place? So the performance that we do every day at this point brings us to the question, how do we live with this? After all of this, the films, the theories, the psychology behind it, where does it leave us? Because it's one thing to analyze performance, but it's completely different beast to live with it every day. And when I think of it, I keep circling back to the fact that we all perform. Actors do it in front of the audience or a camera. Directors shape it on set, but regular people do it at work, in a relationship, in online, and even in front of a bathroom mirror if they're feeling dandy. The question isn't do I perform? The question should be that how do I live with the performance without letting it consume me? And that's where the craft meets life in a way. Stanislavski's lesson would be don't fake it. Even if you're performing, root yourself in something so real that it becomes realistic. Because the audience, no matter if it's cinema or if you're recording yourself in a camera for social media or anything you want, they know what is real and when you're performing. Meisner's lesson would be to listen because presence becomes the antidote to losing yourself. If you're tuned into others, it's less of a mask. The double becomes less of a mask and more of a conduit, if you will. And the Brecht's lesson would be that distancing yourself doesn't mean it's dishonest. It can be an honest representation of yourself, a version of yourself, if you will. And sometimes, so showing the seam, the construction of it all is actually creating more trust than you pretending that you're raw. And Varda's and Kiarostami's lesson that I take away from is, if you're recording yourself, then embrace it. It's not something that you despise or you keep fighting with, but it's something that you accept as a collaborator. And psychology kind of backs it up. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the parts of the self we don't always admit. Integration is the goal, and that's true here too. If you try to live one life in camera and the other life off camera, you're always in the split duel that which one is you, which one should I accept? But instead, if I change my mindset and look at it in a way that, okay, these are both my part and I am allowing to live myself in that aspect, you kind of remove that enemy. The other doesn't become a competitor, but it's a collaborator in a way. And if you are a director or an actor, there are literally practical takeaways from this. Watch yourself, watch your doubles. Actors can study the footages, not necessarily to criticize yourself, but to see the patterns, habits, and truths that show up in your performance which are not there otherwise. For a director, use the double as a tool where sometimes you might need or demand more authenticity, and on other sides you might see that the mask is revealing something which is way more authentic than it was in the surface level. And if you're anybody else, notice your roles at work, with a family member, with friends. Vulnerability is also performance in one way, but it doesn't make it fake, but it makes it shared. So a double is not necessarily your enemy, but a collaborator. Performance is everywhere, in front of a camera, in a stage, with friends, even inside our heads. And every mask we wear isn't necessarily a lie. Some of these alternate versions of ourselves stay. Sometimes it fades away, or some just transform into something new. And that's why cinema feels so powerful in a way. It doesn't just tells us story, but it shows us the mirror of these alternate doublings that we live through. And the directors don't necessarily erase the line between life and performance. It kind of shows us how fragile it can be, and that makes it more beautiful. For me, the lesson is simple, where doubling isn't going away. The version that is here talking to you uh, will not be there when the camera shuts off, but that's okay, because the point is not to destroy the double, but to learn how to live with it. Because at best, the performance is not an enemy of truth, but a rehearsal of truth. Well, this was episode 5, The Double, and I hope you like it. If you're still watching, then thank you so much for watching it. The episode is now on Spotify as well, and do subscribe, like, and drop a comment on what you think about this episode. And yeah, I'll see you in the next episode.